pleasure to be here. We'll stay with the same topic, games and art, from a little different perspective. I'm working on a PhD about the aesthetics of adventure games in the University of Turku, and the topic of today, the puzzle, is also a central component of adventure games. Here we have three approaches: the topic, the aesthetic experience, the expression and evaluation. This presentation will have 5 sections. The first 2 define
this distance between you, the micro and your mouth, please.
define.
More or less than that. Okay.
This is good.
Nice.
Great. So the first 2 define 2 concepts, 2 central concepts. The aesthetic experience, as John Dewey sees the concept, and the fiction puzzle is my own concept. The third and the fourth section are to put the fiction puzzle in the aesthetic experience, as Dewey sees, and the fourth topic examines the puzzle as a expressive mode unique to video games, just like the regular interaction previously. The last one is the priority here, but their aesthetic value, and we'll try to get in there as quickly as possible. Well, firstly, art is a quality of doing and of what is done. John Dewey sees the aesthetic experience quite uniquely. For Dewey, artworks are not artworks in the normal sense that we understand them. They are normal life experiences, events, moments that we get quite intensely into something. We may use the word flow or immersion, that we get into doing something. However, there's also the other aspect, the integral aesthetic experience. For instance, writing a book can also make an aesthetic experience. It might take 6 months, but you're still having the same experience. You're going to sleep, you're going to eat, but eventually, after you've done the 6-month work, you have the experience of writing a book as a whole aesthetic experience. So basically, there are 2 kinds of aesthetic experiences: short-term aesthetic experiences that we get intensely immersed and we finish them in a short time, and then these long-term integral aesthetic experiences. And for Dewey and for us here, these can occur in everyday life, but then there are these objects, art products, that are made to intentionally arouse or produce these aesthetic experiences for people. And what we are doing here is examine how this fiction puzzle is functioning in this aesthetic experience of integral gameplay. Well, there's a definition of a fiction puzzle which owes greatly to Clara Fernandez-Vara's definition of a puzzle. And okay, I'm learning here. Now we're probably getting some progress. Yeah, also Marcel Danesi's definition functions there. There's a couple of points that should be noted. Firstly, the story world. Game studies usually use the word fictional world, which refers to all game worlds. For instance, we had the Tetris example. Tetris has a fictional world, but it does not make a story world. Tetris has no story. So basically, what we are having here is puzzles that are integrated in the story worlds, that is, narrative games and games that have a story for the player to advance. Secondly, there's one difference that is central for traditional jigsaw puzzles and traditional puzzles like Sudokus, whatever comes to your mind, that they are not necessarily having a solution. In my opinion, these puzzles can exist in a narrative digital game without the solution, as we will later see. Then they are sold through a player character, which can also be argued, but let's see that later as well. Now, when we examine the fiction puzzle as an aesthetic experience, firstly we must assume that a game is an integral aesthetic experience. You play a game for 1 week or a month, and after finished, that game makes a whole integral aesthetic experience. That experience involves challenges, and in games those challenges, they're usually physical challenges, but they can as well be, as in this case, puzzles. So these puzzles, as any challenge in a narrative game or any game, can make a short-term experience in itself. When you solve a puzzle or slaughter the dragon or whatever you do in a game to overcome a challenge, you have a short-term experience, or it has the potential to arouse the short-term experience. That's not always the case, but it at least has the potential to do that. In addition, they also have other functions as well. They always pace the integral story. In video games, the story can be paced through these challenges, and you may have a simple puzzle. For instance, normally in a narrative, you open a door and go forward. But in this case, the game might present you as a puzzle. You must first find a key, get the key, and open the door with the key. This puzzle probably won't provide you with any short-term aesthetic experience, at all, but it still paces the story. It has a function in the whole integral experience. Secondly, they always, or sometimes, or at least they have the potential to intensify the long integral aesthetic experience. I have the example of LA Noire, of which probably some of you are familiar with, a detective game that has one of the central puzzles in that, a puzzle type in that game is to, as a detective, to interrogate suspects, and to proceed the narrative, you must find the correct answers in these interrogations, and to do this properly, you must think about the plot, the story, the narrative, what has happened before, and the consequences, what will happen if you choose option A over option B, and what evidence you have gathered so far. So basically, it forces the player, that is the one who is told, who reads the story, it forces him or her to intensify the narrative instead of just passively being told. Finally, there's the constructive element also. My argument is that basically all narratives, not all, but almost all, are constructed of puzzles or requests, as Espen Arsen has it. For instance, in this case, this is from Green Fandango, in which the primary puzzle, that is the driving force of the game, is to proceed in the land of the dead. And in the second chapter, to proceed in this task, you must free Gladys, which requires you to solve 3 smaller puzzles, which is make vacancy on SS limbo, etc. And to do that, you must solve 6 smaller puzzles. So basically, the whole construction of a narrative in games is a construction of puzzles, smaller puzzles and bigger puzzles that are ultimately ending up as a story that the player advances. Once more, we're going back. Now, if we're going to the value question, I also argue that fiction puzzles are capable of expression. They owe a great lot to riddles, and it's about giving a new perspective on something already familiar. So basically, when we solve a puzzle, it doesn't provide you anything new, but it makes you connect information that you already knew, but from a new perspective. There's 2 kinds of expression. There's unintentional and intentional, and I argue that the intentional one is the unique mode of expression for games when compared to traditional puzzles or traditional riddles. First, about the value is the question of difficulty. When we think about good games, good as fine artworks, we must question whether they are too difficult or too easy. This, however, is not a question of a game solely. It is also a question of all art. For instance, a critic familiar with the whole history of film might well see some symbols and allegories as obvious, which does not arouse an aesthetic experience. However, for someone who's not, these will arouse the aesthetic experience. So there's a difference. There's not always an equal effect in the difficulty. So I think it is not about the difficulty that the value, the aesthetic value of things are. It's more about the unique means of expression of an art form, which is in this case a video game or an interactive puzzle such as fiction puzzle. Now, Marcel Danesi claims that elegance is the central component which forms the aesthetic value of puzzles, and I see it as quite the same as here we have a definition of Strickland's minimalism. It's a stylish genius by severity of means, clarity of form, and simplicity of structure, which means that a good puzzle would be of purity of means in solving, clarity in manifesting the problem, and briefness in its solution. However, fiction puzzles are a bit different. They are in story worlds, and they, for this reason, have 3 additional aspects which should be considered when thinking about their value. They must be logical in the story world they are integrated in, and there is always a level of integration and success of expression if one wants to express something. So basically the overall aesthetic value of a fiction puzzle is a combination of the 2, the elegance of form and content. First, about the logicality. Each game has its own story world, which has its own rules. It's an abstraction of real world. So when we think about the logicality of a puzzle in a story world, it is not about the logicality in our world, but it should cohere with the rules of the particular story world it is integrated in. Next, about the integration. When we talk about integrating puzzles in story worlds, there's always a level in which it is integrated. To understand that, it is good to take the concept of diegetic elements in film. It is about elements that are shown to the audience, but not to the fictional characters in the movie. For instance, there might be text, there might be music that the characters in the film do not hear or see, and this is what refers to the integration of puzzles as well. I argue that fine puzzles are integrated diegetic elements in the game rather than these pop-up windows that you must solve. There's also two sides in this integration. This integration of form and content. Formally integrated puzzles are integrated there as say they are physical components of the story world. So if there's a riddle, you find a piece of paper where is the riddle, then it is physically integrated. But if solving the riddle requires nothing about the story world, then it has no content, integration of content. So basically, if you need some means from the story world to advance, to overcome the puzzle, then it is also integrated by content. Finally, the expression. Unfortunately, we don't have that much time to discuss about the expression, which is, I argue, one of the unique means of unique modes of expression that video games are capable of expressing, just like they regulated the interaction previously. But I argue that there are cases in which this intentional expression can be seen as an aesthetically valuable element in games. Well, if we have time to discuss, I can answer a couple of questions. But basically, what I argue is that these aesthetically valuable puzzles provide enriched aesthetic experiences for players when compared to those with lesser aesthetic value. And this is not to say that these are only values that puzzles may have. They, as Trunstad has put it, there's also other values that one might consider, but these are the values that are to improve the aesthetic experience of a narrative game. That's basically it. Thank you.